Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII is a third-person shooter starring Vincent Valentine. The game takes place 3 years after the events in Final Fantasy VII and 1 year after the events in the movie Advent Children. You play as Vincent Valentine, who is a secret character in Final Fantasy VII. He's kind of this immortal experiment gone wrong with these superpowers to transform into these crazy beasts. He's also lightning quick, and he's just an all-around badass. So you play as Vincent, and basically what happens is these soldiers come in and start causing a bunch of problems. They want to resurrect the Omega weapon once again and destroy the world, of course. As Vincent, you have to prevent this from happening. But then you also find out a bit about your past and your history and why you are required to resurrect Omega weapon. So basically you're also being pursued while you're pursuing these people. It's an interesting look at the history of Vincent Valentine, who is one of the cooler characters from Final Fantasy VII. But at the same time, it's also a separate story that doesn't really relate specifically to Final Fantasy VII. Some of the Final Fantasy VII characters do show up in some cutscenes, but for the most part, it's all just about Vincent Valentine, discovering his past and just kicking ass. Dirge of Cerberus is your basic third-person shooter, but it controls more like a first-person shooter in that you control your movement with the left analog stick and you're aiming with the right analog stick, which makes it pretty easy to strafe around and shoot at the same time while keeping your aim steady. The problem is that the shooting really isn't that satisfying. You only get a handful of guns in the game, and although you can upgrade them to make them more powerful, they still don't really feel all that special. And they don't feel all that different either. You have your Cerberus, which is your basic pistol, and you can really use that through the entire game if you want to. There's a targeting assist system which makes it really easy to shoot bad guys because it just snaps your aiming reticle right to any enemy that appears on screen. Usually what happens is you'll run into a room or run down a hallway. A few enemies will jump out from behind some boxes. You cap them all really fast. It only takes maybe a couple shots to take down each enemy. And then you move on to do the same thing over and over and over again. All the levels are really linear, so you're just running from one end of a level to the next, usually with a boss fight at the end. Occasionally you'll have some missions that pop up, such as protect all the civilians or disarm all the mines that are hidden in the ground. The missions are all optional, but if you complete them you'll earn points which you can spend to upgrade your weapons or to level up Vincent between each chapter. There's around a dozen levels to play through, and some of them take place in familiar locations like the ruined city of Midgar or the sewers of Nibelheim. But none of the levels really look all that interesting, and again, they're just more like a long corridor because there's no real exploration involved. You're just running through a hallway, shooting everything that moves, and just doing it over and over again. There's a magic system in the game as well. You can collect materia or you can purchase it, and then you can equip that to your weapons. If you have enough magic points, you can then fire a magic shot, such as a fire shot or a thunder shot, which does more damage and has a wider area of effect. The problem is that even with a full magic gauge, you can only get a few shots off before you're completely depleted. Then you have to use an ether or something to replenish your magic points and do it again. But the thing is, the magic really isn't that useful. It does some damage and it can take out a lot of enemies at once, but you can also do the same thing with your regular pistol as long as you have a fairly fast trigger finger. Now if you remember Vincent Valentine from Final Fantasy VII, you remember that his big ability was to transform into all these crazy monsters. He has a limit break again in this game, but you only get to transform into one specific monster. It's just this beast that throws magic and can also do some pretty heavy damage with its claws. If you transform into the beast, you can take out a whole room full of guys or a boss in pretty short order. But again, the limit breaks aren't really that necessary because your standard weapon will do just as much damage just as fast. The in-game graphics in Dirge of Cerberus aren't all that impressive. A lot of the levels are just designed so that you run from one end to the next, so there's really not a lot to see. You'll also see a lot of the same visual touches like boxes or crates used over and over again throughout each level. So you'll see the same room or hallway again and again. There are a ton of cutscenes in Dirge of Cerberus, which look a little bit better than the action because they focus on the character models, which are fairly well done. Vincent looks as cool as ever in his tattered red cape and his messed up hair. But at the same time, some of the other characters are a little bit bizarre, a little bit garish. There are also some pre-rendered cutscenes which look excellent. It looks like something taken straight from the Advent Children movie, and it's worth playing through a level just to see these cutscenes. Unfortunately, there's only a small handful of these pre-rendered cutscenes, and we'd like to see a lot more. It'll take you about 9 or 10 hours to play through the story mode in Dirge of Cerberus, but then after that you unlock some extra missions. The extra missions are actually a lot more interesting than the story missions and a lot more fun. There's about 45 missions in all, and you can actually have a lot of fun playing through these. It's a much better experience than the story mode. But that said, it might not really be worth playing through story mode just to get these few extra missions. Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII is a fairly mediocre shooter that's dressed up with some Final Fantasy VII touches. It's interesting to get some of Vincent Valentine's backstory, but at the same time, it won't really satisfy your craving for something new from the Final Fantasy VII universe. Also, the shooting is fairly lackluster and not very satisfying, and it gets old really quick. So if you're looking for a quick, simple shooter that you can blast through in a weekend or so, you might be satisfied with Dirge of Cerberus. But if you're looking for anything more, you'll be left feeling disappointed.